My name is Ayesha Rahman, and I am 39 years old. Before I begin, if you believe women should never be humiliated in silence, subscribe to this channel, because what happened to me almost destroyed me, but it also awakened something in me that my husband deeply underestimated. I was married to Imran Rahman for 16 years. 16 years of building, supporting, sacrificing. When I met Imran, he was ambitious but broke. He had dreams bigger than his bank account, and confidence bigger than his experience. I was working as a financial analyst back then. Stable salary, predictable life. I believed in him when no one else did. We built Rahman infrastructure from our dining table. I handled the early accounts. I negotiated our first supplier credit. I even mortgaged my inherited apartment so he could secure his first contract. But when success finally came, it came fast. 3 years ago, Imran secured $120 million Australian public infrastructure deal. Within months, investors lined up. Media started calling him the self-made visionary. He was on magazine covers, panel discussions, business awards, and slowly, I became invisible. He stopped introducing me as his partner in the business. I became his wife. Then I became Arham's mother. Then I became background. There was a new presence in the office. His executive strategy manager, Ayesha Malik, 20-7 years old. MBA from London. Sharp, polished, always perfectly dressed. She accompanied him to conferences, investor meetings, late-night strategy sessions. At first, I ignored it. I trusted him. 16 years of marriage teaches you to trust patterns. Until the pattern changes. 2 months ago, Imran insisted we host a grand anniversary celebration at our house. 16 years deserves something special, he said. I should have known. The guest list wasn't family-focused. It was investors, board members, media contacts, political affiliates. It felt more like a corporate gala than an anniversary. I wore a deep emerald sari that night. It was the one I wore the day he signed his first $1 million deal, I thought. It would remind him of where we started. The house was glowing with chandeliers and white roses. Music playing softly. Champagne glasses clinking. Around 9:30 p.m. Imran tapped his glass for attention. I stood beside him smiling. I want to thank everyone for being part of my journey, he began. My journey, not ours. I noticed it immediately. He spoke about growth, vision, leadership, evolution. Then his tone shifted. Sometimes in life, he continued, we outgrow chapters that were necessary for our foundation, but not our future. The room felt colder. My fingers tightened around my clutch. He extended his hand toward someone in the crowd. Santa walked forward in a white gown. She stood beside him confidently. I believe in transparency, he said calmly. And tonight feels like the right time to introduce the woman who will stand beside me in the next chapter of my life. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. I have filed for divorce, he continued. Ayesha and I have grown apart. We want different things. I wanted loyalty. He wanted novelty. The silence in the room was violent. Some people looked at me with pity. Some avoided eye contact, and some already knew. Santa placed her hand on his arm. He didn't hesitate. This is the future, he said. At our anniversary party, 16 years reduced to a corporate transition. If this moment makes your blood boil, subscribe. Because what I did next shocked even me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply asked for the microphone. The audacity of calmness unsettles people more than tears. I'm glad you chose transparency tonight, I said evenly. Imran looked slightly uncomfortable. I believe in transparency too. The room leaned in, but since we're sharing future plans, perhaps we should also clarify the past agreements. His expression changed just slightly, but I saw it because, unlike him, I understand contracts, and what he forgot was that, before Rahman Infrastructure was legally structured, it existed under a holding partnership. One signed under my name. He always said, it's just temporary paperwork. Temporary paperwork with permanent power. I didn't reveal everything that night. Not yet. Instead, I handed him the divorce papers he had prepared earlier that day. I had already read them. He had listed himself as sole founder, sole strategic, visionary, primary shareholder. He erased me legally, except he couldn't because the first 2 foundational share certificates, they still carried my signature as majority signatory. And the board didn't know that, he thought. I never paid attention after stepping back to raise Arham, but I never stepped back. I stepped quietly. There's a difference. I leaned into the microphone again. I wish you happiness in your next chapter, I said calmly. Then I looked directly at Santa, and I hope you read everything carefully before you sign anything. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. The night ended. Awkwardly guessed left in whispers. Imran. didn't follow me upstairs. He stayed downstairs with her. That told me everything. I packed one suitcase, took my son, and left before sunrise. But here's what he didn't know. Before leaving, I logged into the original shareholder portal, the one he assumed was inactive, and I scheduled an emergency board review. Asterisk. Foundational ownership clarification and governance concerns. If you think that was petty, wait until you hear what those documents revealed before I continue to next, where the board meeting changes everything. Tell me something. If your husband replaced you publicly after 16 years, would you walk away quietly? Or would you make sure the truth was documented? Subscribe now, because ahead is where his empire begins to crack. Asterisk before I continue. Subscribe, because what happened next wasn't emotional revenge. It was structural collapse, and it began at 8:15 a.m., the morning after the anniversary party humiliation. I was sitting inside a rented apartment with half-unpacked boxes when my phone started. Vibrating nonstop. Messages. Missed calls. Media inquiries. Someone had leaked a video clip from the party, the headline circulating online. Billion rupee CEO announces divorce and new partner at anniversary celebration. Imran's PR team was working overtime, but they didn't know about the email I had scheduled at exactly 9 a.m. Every board member received it. Asterisk foundational shareholding clarification, immediate governance review. Required attached were scanned. Copies of the original partnership agreement, early capital injection records from my inherited property sale, the pre-incorporation holding structure, Clause 14B, Majority Protective Authority Clause, 14B. The clause Imran always dismissed as just technical. It clearly stated, any executive restructuring or major leadership transition requires written consent from the original majority capital guarantor. That guarantor, me. By announcing my removal, personally and professionally, without formal board process, he had violated governance protocol. And if there's one thing investors fear more than scandal, it's governance instability. By 11:30 a.m., I received a call from Mr. Qureshi, Senior Independent Director. His voice was tight. Ayesha. Why were we not informed of this structure? Because Imran never wanted you to know, I thought, but I said calmly. Because the company narrative shifted from partnership to personality. Silence. Then he said something important. The board is convening at 2 p.m. You will attend. Imran had no idea at 1:45 p.m. I walked into Rahman Infrastructure headquarters for the first time in 8 months. Employees froze. Some looked guilty, some relieved, some shocked. Imran was already inside the boardroom when I entered. He didn't expect me, that was clear. His jaw tightened. This is unnecessary, he said under his breath. As I took my seat, I placed a leather folder on the table. This is overdue. The meeting began formally. Mr. Qureshi cleared his throat. We need clarification regarding ownership in yesterday's public announcement. Imran tried to control the narrative. It was a personal matter. My divorce has nothing to do with corporate governance. I opened my folder and slid a document across the table. It does, I said evenly. The board members leaned forward. I spoke clearly. Professionally, no emotion. Under Clause 14B, any executive structural change requires written approval from the majority founding guarantor. I was neither informed nor consulted. Imran's voice sharpened. That clause is outdated. I met his eyes. Legally binding documents don't expire because they're inconvenient. The legal advisor began flipping pages quickly. The silence in the room grew heavier. Then came the second blow. For full transparency, I continued. I have also requested a review of executive expense allocations from the past 18 months. Imran stiffened. That's ridiculous. Is it? I asked softly, because 3 weeks before the anniversary party, I had quietly requested financial extracts from an old contact in accounting. And what I found was disturbing. Private jet trips coded as strategic site inspection, luxury resort stays coded as regional stakeholder meetings. 3 consultancy payments to a newly registered firm, that firm owned by Sana's cousin. The board members were now fully alert. Mr. Qureshi leaned back slowly. Imran, is this accurate? His response was defensive. Every expense was strategic. I replied calmly. Then an audit will confirm that. And that's when the atmosphere shifted. Not marital drama, not jealousy, but financial irregularities. The board voted 5-2 in favor of initiating an independent audit. Executive authority, temporarily restricted. External PR advisory, engaged all leadership announcements. Frozen pending review. Imran's face lost color. He wasn't used to losing control, especially not to me. After the meeting, he followed me into the hallway. You're destroying everything, he hissed. No, I said quietly. You did that last night. He lowered his voice. What do you want? Money? Property? I turned toward him slowly. I want accountability. That scared him more than anger would have. By evening, investors began calling, not me, the board. They wanted reassurance, stability, control, and here's the part that truly shifted power. Because I still held documented founding authority, I was invited to sit on the temporary governance oversight committee during the audit, not as a wife, as a structural stakeholder. Imran went from celebrated, visionary, to monitored executive in less than 24 hours. But that wasn't the breaking point. The breaking point came 3 days later. The audit team flagged a flagged transaction cluster, 3 internal vendor contracts totaling nearly $4.8 million, all approved directly by IMRAN, all connected indirectly to Sana's network. That wasn't just unethical, it was prosecutable. When the legal consultant quietly informed the board of potential liability exposure, they panicked because public infrastructure contracts require strict compliance. If the government review committee detected irregularities, the $120 million project could be suspended. Imran called me that night. 30-2 missed calls. I answered. The 30-3. His voice was no longer arrogant. Ayesha, please. Double quotes, please. I had not heard that word from him in years. We can settle this privately, he said. There is no private version of public fraud, I replied. Silence then. He said something revealing. You planned this. I paused. No, I prepared for it. There's a difference. Asterisk, if you're still here, subscribe. Because S-Head is where the investigation becomes public. The media turns ruthless, and Imran realizes he underestimated the one person who built the foundation beneath his empire. And now I want to ask you. When a man humiliates you publicly, but his power depends on paperwork you quietly protected, is defending yourself revenge? Or is it responsibility? Tell me your thoughts because next is where everything explodes. Asterisk, before I begin, subscribe. Because this part is not about revenge. It's about what happens when a man builds his throne on borrowed loyalty and forgets who laid the foundation. 3 days after the board restricted Imran's executive authority, the audit findings were no longer internal. Someone leaked it, and this time, it wasn't a birthday video, it was financial documentation. Headlines started appearing by sunrise. Rahman Infrastructure under governance review. Executive expense irregularities. Raise compliance questions. CEO's personal relationship tied to vendor contracts. The business community doesn't forgive scandal easily, but they never forgive compliance risk by 10 a.m. The government oversight body sent a formal inquiry notice by noon. 2 minor investors froze additional capital commitments by evening. Social media had turned ruthless. The same commentators who once called Imran self-made were now dissecting his rise, and somewhere between all of this noise, I was sitting in the Governance Oversight Committee room reviewing internal files. Focused, detached. Because when humiliation transforms into clarity, you stop reacting emotionally. IMRAN, however, was unraveling. He called an emergency executive team meeting without board authorization. That was his first mistake. He tried to reassure department heads that everything was temporary media exaggeration, but when one senior finance officer quietly mentioned the word forensic audit, the room shifted. People protect stability, not personalities. By late afternoon, I received confirmation from legal counsel. The audit team had traced $6.2 million in misclassified executive expenses, and worse. 2 of the consultancy payments tied back to a shell firm that routed money into a property acquisition, partially owned by Sana. It wasn't just inappropriate, it was traceable. That's when the board called for an extraordinary vote, 6:30 p.m., closed. Session no media. No executives, just directors and legal I. Was allowed in? Imran wasn't. He waited outside the glass doors for 42 minutes. I know because I could see him pacing when they finally invited him in. The air felt suffocating. Mr. Qureshi spoke first. Imran pending investigation outcomes and to protect contractual relationships, the board is voting on temporary suspension from active CEO duties. Temporary. Corporate language is polite before it becomes permanent. Imran looked at me. Not angry, not furious, but confused, as if he truly never believed this could happen. The vote passed unanimously. His executive access was revoked that night. Security protocol updated. Media statement drafted. And just like that, the man who publicly replaced me at our anniversary was escorted out of his own headquarters. But the collapse wasn't finished. It never is, because reputation damage spreads in layers. The Government Contract Review Committee initiated a compliance Pause. That alone cost the company millions in delayed billing. Banks began reevaluating credit exposure, and the press, they dug deeper. Within 48 hours. A lifestyle blog exposed images of Imran and Sana vacationing during what had been labeled site development review. The dates matched expense claims. Public perception shifted from speculation to assumption. And assumption is powerful. That night, Imran came to my apartment. No driver, no arrogance, no designer suit, just a man stripped of position, asterisk. He stood at the door for almost 30 seconds before knocking. When I opened it, he didn't speak immediately. I miscalculated. He finally said that sentence held more honesty than his apology. "You thought I wouldn't fight back?" I replied calmly. He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't think you'd dismantle everything." I looked at him carefully. "I didn't dismantle it. I exposed what you hid. There's a difference." He sat down heavily. "They're going to remove me permanently." I didn't answer because, at that moment, I realized something important. He wasn't grieving our marriage. He was grieving his power. Then he said something that changed the emotional tone of everything. "I never meant to hurt Aram." That hit. Because, no matter how controlled I had been in boardrooms, I was still a mother. "Then why humiliate his mother?" I asked quietly. He didn't respond because there is no strategic answer to cruelty. The next morning, the board announced interim restructuring. I was formally appointed acting governance chair. During transition, not CEO, but the one who ensured compliance and stabilization, the media framed it as poetic irony. Founding partner steps in during crisis. They didn't know half of it. Sana resigned 2 days later. No statement, no farewell, just absence, asterisk, and suddenly the empire Imran had centered around himself began functioning without him. That realization broke something inside him. 3 weeks later, the board voted again. Permanent removal as CEO, retention as minority shareholder. Under oversight. Imran signed the agreement because the alternative was worse. Litigation, regulatory. Escalation. Possible criminal inquiry. He chose humiliation over destruction. But here's the truth no one talks about. Winning doesn't feel victorious when it costs 16 years of shared history at night. When the company stabilized and headlines quieted, I would sit alone wondering, did I go too far? Should I have handled it privately? Was exposure necessary? And then I would remember that moment at the anniversary party, the microphone, the public, replacement. The erasure. And I would remind myself, silence would have made me complicit. If you're still watching, subscribe. Asterisk. Because next isn't about collapse, it's about consequence, it's about whether forgiveness exists after power imbalance. And it's about the question I still struggle with when a man loses everything he built and realizes too late who helped him build it. Do you rebuild with him? Or do you finally build alone? Before we move to the final part, tell me, was removing him justified, or should loyalty survive betrayal? Before I begin, subscribe. Because this final part is not dramatic. It is quiet. And sometimes the quiet aftermath is heavier than the explosion. It has been 7 months since Imran was permanently removed as CEO. 7 months since the anniversary party. 7 months since I walked out of my own home with one suitcase and a 12-year-old boy trying not to cry. The company survived. Barely at first. The compliance review cleared major fraud allegations but confirmed ethical misconduct and financial misrepresentation. Fines were negotiated. The government contract resumed under stricter monitoring. Investor confidence returned gradually, and I remained on the board, not because I wanted power, but because walking away would mean abandoning what I helped build. IMRA and retained minority shares, but no executive authority. He now attends meetings as a silent shareholder, and I sit across the table from him. Professional.com measured, we rarely make eye contact. People assume that must feel victorious. It doesn't. It feels final the first time. Arham saw his father after everything collapsed. It was awkward. Children understand tension without being told. Imran tried to speak normally, asked about school, football, homework, but Arham watched him differently, as if recalibrating who his father was. Later that night, my son asked me something. I wasn't prepared for Amy. If Baba says sorry, do we just pretend nothing happened? Children ask the questions adults avoid. No, I told him gently. Saying sorry fixes behavior, it doesn't erase history. He nodded slowly, and I realized something painful. This wasn't just about betrayal between husband and wife, it was about the kind of man our son would grow up watching. 3 months after his removal, Imran asked to meet me privately. Public cafe, neutral space. He looked different, not broken but humbled. I thought success meant upgrading everything, he admitted quietly. Upgrading. Yes. Lifestyle, image, partner. There it was. The truth without corporate language. I convinced myself we had grown apart, he continued. But I never asked if we had. That sentence stayed with me. Because marriages don't collapse in one night, they erode. Silently, but erosion doesn't justify demolition. He said he had started therapy. That surprised me. He admitted he had become addicted to validation, to being admired, to being seen as powerful. When you build something from nothing, he said, you fear becoming nothing again. That fear had driven him, not love for another woman, not even dissatisfaction with me, but ego, fragile ego disguised as ambition. And here's the complicated part. For the first time since the anniversary party, I felt something other than anger. I felt clarity. I realized I didn't hate him. I had outgrown him. There's a difference. Reconciliation was discussed, not passionately, not dramatically, but practically. Could we rebuild? Trust is not rebuilt by apologies. It's rebuilt by consistency over time, and some fractures never return to their original strength. We chose separation, not out of revenge, but out of realism. We co-parent, respectfully. We communicate about ARHAM. We attend school events without hostility. But the marriage is over. And strangely, I am not bitter. I am aware. Aware that love without respect erodes. Aware that silence protects no one. Aware that power dynamics reveal character. The company board recently offered me a permanent executive leadership position. I declined instead. I created a governance advisory division within the firm. I focus on compliance, structural stability, and leadership accountability. Ironically, the woman who was once reduced to just the wife now oversees ethical frameworks. Life has a quiet sense of irony. As for Sana, she resurfaced briefly in industry circles under a different firm. But credibility follows history, and history leaves. Digital footprints, I don't think about her. Much because the real conflict was never between women. It was between character and ego. Imran recently told me something that surprised me. Losing the company hurt. Losing you reshaped me. That sentence felt honest. But honesty after betrayal is not currency, it is consequence. Now, I want to ask you something. Did I do the right thing by exposing everything publicly? Should I have handled it quietly for the sake of family image? Should loyalty survive humiliation? If you were in my position, would you have walked away silently, or would you have defended your name? Comment below. Tell me honestly, and subscribe, because stories like mine aren't about revenge. They're about remembering that you are never replaceable in something you helped build. And sometimes, the woman they try to remove from the stage becomes the one who rewrites the script entirely.